When I did my early spring check of the garden, I noticed that there were some pallet collars that had broken. So before I start to clean up the raised beds, I do need to change these collars. And as you can see here, they are bulging and the wood is breaking basically. So I started with the middle one in the first row, because that's the one I've noticed in this row. And as it turned out, there was a broken collar even in the raised bed that is closest to the camera here. It would have been good if I could have taken these old pieces of wood to a spring bonfire late in April, but since they also consist of pieces of metal, I need to take them to our recycling area in our local town instead. Before I put a new collar in, I just wanted to clean up a bit on the sides towards the other pallet collars, and that turned out to be not such a good idea because it got a bit hard to put a new collar in actually. And when I did the rest of the collars, I changed method. Still, it was good that I did it, because I then discovered that there was a big hole also in the first pallet collar, so I had to change that one as well. And in this bed I also discovered a hole in the soil, and I guess it's either a mole or a vole that's been doing something there, living, eating. So I've got the first layer of pallet collars back in place. I wasn't totally pleased with the middle one, so I tried to knock it into place, and it maybe was a bit better after that. And now I put the second layer on, and I usually just use two on top of each other, and cleaned up a bit around the pallets as well. I started this work in mid-March and continued on March 24th with these three that also needed to be changed. I'm taking the cover of the two that's furthest away. I've used these two for composting, and I didn't have any cover on to start with, but the birds kept going into them and picking out papers and coffee filters and spreading in the garden, so I needed to cover them. In the raised bed closest to the camera, I had some Jerusalem artichoke, and I decided to keep these and plant them in another raised bed in the front garden. I'm struggling a bit here to put a new color on the raised bed, and the problem was of course that the bed was now too wide for the color, and I didn't realize this to begin with, but I solved it in the end and used another technique for the other two. The colors that I put on the raised bed now are not new ones. I'm not spending any money on that right now, so I'm just looking for the best colors that I have to use at the moment. After putting a second color on, I cleaned up a bit in the soil. There were a few pieces left of the old pallet color, and I did not want them in the bed. And then I shifted some of the compost material from the bed that was furthest away. It was a bit too full, and I also wanted some compost material in this first one as well, because all three are going to be used for tomatoes and cucumbers later on in the season. And then I picked up the soil that was spilled on the outside of the pallet collar and put it back in the raised bed. For the raised bed in the middle, I just cleaned out on the short sides and then trimmed the long sides, and it was quite easy to put a new pallet collar on this one then. When I went to put the second layer on, I discovered that that pallet collar was a bit damaged, but I decided to keep it anyway. As I said, I'm not spending money on pallet colors right now. The third bed was quite compact and very easy to trim on the sides. There were some holes here too in the raised bed from either moles or voles, and I'm not too worried about them in the garden. They are part of garden life. This third raised bed was by far the easiest to put new colors back on to, and now all three are done in this row. I decided to put a cover on the raised bed closest to the camera because that one still had some compost material in it. And now it's just to wait for the tomatoes and cucumbers to get ready to be planted.